then kids were better or anything like that. This is something that has existed for all time. And so we need to make sure that we don't fall into this trap as the children of God. So my message today is, how do we combat a rebellious spirit within ourselves? And there are some examples in the Bible of parent and child relationships. But the one I wanted to focus on wasn't a parent and child relationship per se. What I was going to talk about is examples from the life of Moses leading the people of Israel. And I know it wasn't a parent-child relationship, but there's actually allusions to it being like that. Moses is like, did I bear all these children that I have to take care of them like this? So there's definitely that dynamic. So even though he's leading adults, sometimes they act a little immature. And the goal here is, as children, as youth, we need to go from a place of immaturity to a place of maturity. So we're going to look at some examples from Moses leading the people of Israel. So specifically, we're going to look at some instances where there was a rebellion. And so in Numbers chapter 16, verse 3, there's the story of a rebellion against Moses. And it says here, they assembled together against Moses and Aaron and said to them, "You have gone far enough, for all the congregation are holy, every one of them, and the Lord is in their midst. So why do you exalt yourselves above the assembly of the Lord?" So here we see what they're saying is, we're just as holy as you. Like, what makes you so great? We are all holy just like you, Moses and Aaron. So why are you putting yourself in leadership over us? So this was their complaint to him. And it's similar to what happens with children to a certain extent, because when children are really young, they tend to look up to their parents. They view their parents as knowing everything, as being the strongest person in the world. But over time, as they go older, they start to become as strong as their parents, potentially. Sometimes they become as intelligent as their parents, or at least they start to show signs of intelligence the more they mature. And so, at some point, they might start to think, I'm actually smarter than my parents, or I'm stronger than my parents. And so, in that instance, there's this temptation to react in a way where you think that you know more than your parents, or that your parents shouldn't be the ones leading you. And we see this kind of instance in the case of Moses and this rebellion. And this rebellion was led by a person named Korah. In verses 8 through 10, it says, "Then Moses said to Korah, 'Hear now, you sons of Levi. Is it not enough for you that the God of Israel has separated you from the rest of the congregation of Israel, to bring you near to himself, to do the service of the tabernacle of the Lord, and to stand before the congregation to minister to them, and that he has brought you near, Korah, and all your brothers, sons of Levi, with you? And are you seeking for the priesthood also?'" So what do you see here? The people who are leading the rebellion are actually ministers before God. God gave them the role of being ministers, but they're not satisfied with the role that was given to them. And so they're trying to rebel against Moses and Aaron. So you may ask, what does this have to do with parents and children? Well, one thing that sometimes is forgotten as children is understanding the privileges that we have, the good things that God has given us. Sometimes we forget about that and just focus on everything our parents won't let us do, everything that our parents are getting in the way of us doing. Sometimes we just focus on that stuff. But one of the ways to combat a spirit of rebellion is to be thankful for the privileges that you have. Be thankful for the things that you have. Even something as simple as having a mom and a dad, that is something unique in the culture we live in. Not most children in America, or at least a large portion of children in America, they're not able to live with both their mom and their dad. And so even something as simple as that is a privilege that we have. And we must be thankful for those things that we have. We must be thankful for the blessings that God has given us. So the first point I wanted to make is, it's kind of hard to see on there, But the first point I wanted to make is that we need to be thankful for the privileges that we have. We need to be thankful for those privileges that God has given us. And one of the things I want to talk about is just this concept of rights versus responsibility. Because a lot of times, in America especially, we're always focused on our rights, what our rights are as people. And you may think, when I turn 18, I have the right to do whatever I want. But that's actually a sign of immaturity. Because when you get to a place of maturity, you're no longer focused on your rights, you're more focused on your responsibilities. It goes from a place of self-centeredness to a place of what can I do to help my family? What can I do to help my community? So I'd encourage you to shift your focus from focusing on rights to focusing on responsibilities. Because we are definitely privileged, and we must be thankful for the privilege that God has given to us. Next, moving on to Numbers chapter 16, verses 12 through 14. Here we have a situation, I'll go and read it. It says, so in addition to Korah, there was Dathan and Abiram that were rebelling. Here it says, then Moses sent a summons to Dathan and Abiram, the sons of Eliab. But they said, we will not come up. Is it not enough that you have brought us up out of a land flowing with milk and honey to have us die in the wilderness? But you would also lord it over us? Indeed, you have not brought us into a land flowing with milk and honey, nor have you given us an inheritance of fields and vineyards. Would you put out the eyes of these men? We will not come up. So Moses is summoning these people to come to them, and they refuse. They say, we're not going to come up. So I'm not going to focus on that, but I wanted to focus on this other part where they're criticizing Moses for everything that Moses has done wrong. Now, to give you a little bit more context, this is after Moses sent out the 10 spies. And the 10 spies came back, and 10 of the spies came back, and they said, we can't go fight, and they're afraid. And then God tells them they have to go back in the wilderness, and then the people decide they want to fight, and they end up losing. And so then Moses has to take them back out to the wilderness. So we know that story in detail, and we know that it wasn't Moses' fault. It was the people's fault, those 10 spies' fault, that they caused the people to be afraid, and then they didn't listen to God. But you don't see that in this description by Dathan and Abiram, because they're not focused on the situation as a whole. They're just focused on criticizing Moses. And that's another thing when it comes to maturity and immaturity, is that when you come to a place of maturity, your focus isn't on criticizing someone or demeaning someone. Your focus is on finding a solution and truly understanding all of the impact of what's happening, truly understanding the actual circumstance, and not just focus on criticizing your leader in that case. And the same is true in a parent and child relationship. A lot of times as children, we expect our parents to be like magicians, like they can change our situation, or they can do something to make things all better. And when we're really young, maybe that's true, but sometimes there are situations where they can't do that. They're not all powerful. They're not able to change everything and make things better. And so we have to be more understanding as children. And so that goes to my second point, which is we need to be people, children need to be able to show grace to their parents. Children need to be able to show mercy to their parents, because a lot of times we expect too much of them. And we have to realize that parents are just as fallible as any other human. They make mistakes. And sometimes as children, we expect our parents to have mercy on us. We expect them to be understanding of us, but we show them absolutely no understanding. We show them no grace. We expect them to be perfect. But we have to realize that they're not perfect. And we have to be willing to show them the same grace that they show to us. Now finally, in the one last instance I wanted to share is from Numbers 32, verses 6 through 8. Here it says, but Moses said to the sons of Gad and to the sons of Reuben, shall your brothers go to war while you yourselves sit here? Now why are you discounting the sons of Israel from crossing over into the land which the Lord has given them? This is what your fathers did when I sent them from Kadesh Barnea to see the land. Now, there's not a lot of detail in here, but I'll give you the context. Basically what happened is Israel defeated some of the nations to the east of the Jordan River. And they're about to cross the Jordan River to take over the Promised Land. But since they defeated some of these nations, there's all this land there, and Gad and Reuben wanted to settle there and put their families there and all of that. So they come and tell that to Moses, and then Moses gets upset because he thinks they're trying to create a situation where no one's going to want to cross over and fight because they're living on this side. So he says, I sent them, he alludes to the Kadesh Barnea situation, which was when they sent out the 10 spies. But then what happens is Reuben and Gad say that they will go and fight with them. And then they'll return after they've conquered the Promised Land. Now, the reason I brought up this story is you see that Moses is really angry at them, and he's targeting them, and he's telling them, he's basically calling them out. And their response, they could have gotten angry at Moses. They could have gotten into a fight, but instead they explained to him what their actual intention is. And what happens is, after they communicate with each other, they're able to come to a consensus and an understanding that there really isn't some underhanded issue that Reuben and Gad are trying to create, because they're going to come help them fight and conquer the land. So the point I wanted to make with this is they had the potential for conflict here, but instead of having conflict, they talked to each other and they were able to resolve their conflict. And the same thing is true with a parent and a child relationship. Sometimes all that's needed is some communication. And sometimes as teenagers or young people, our tendency might be to shut ourselves up in our room, to cancel all dialogue, to become separate from our parents. But I think it's important for us to have those open lines of communication and to communicate in the right way. You don't want to go out there and communicate in a condescending way to your parents. You want to communicate in a humble way. And a lot of times, a lot of issues can just be resolved if you just have that conversation. And so, the 3 key points that I wanted to talk about when it comes to combating a rebellious spirit within ourselves is, first off, it's important for us to be thankful for the privileges that we have. A lot of times we focus on all of the things we don't have, but we must be thankful as children for the privileges that we have. And when you start to have a mindset of gratitude, it helps you to have a better spirit within you. Next, we need to be understanding of our parents, that they have limitations, and we must show them the same grace that we expect to be given to us. And finally, we must communicate to clear up any misunderstandings. So that's really all my messages today. And so I'd encourage you, and maybe y'all aren't very severe when it comes to being rebellious or anything like that, but these things can grow in tiny steps. These things can start to grow up and build up in our lives. So don't give a foothold in your life for a spirit of rebellion. And I'd encourage you to don't just hear this message and just let it go and not take any actions. Maybe one thing that you can do is say thank you to your parents. This evening, you just take the time to go say thank you to your parents for all that they do for you. Or maybe what you need to do is have a conversation with them. Maybe you've kind of separated yourself for a long time. Maybe even this evening, take the time to have a conversation, a good conversation, a deep conversation, not just one that's on the surface. And understand that your parents are trying to do what's best for you. They love you. And try to return that by not rebelling, not doing your own thing, but trying to have a positive relationship with them. And may the Spirit of God bless us and guide us to behave in the way that is honoring to God and not to be led away by a rebellious spirit. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen, for the relevant and pertinent message, a topic on parent-child relationship. May God continue to bless you. Let us put our hands together once again to give Him the glory.